people here, all undecided voters, and we've been monitoring their every reaction to every single word and phrase uttered by the three leaders. And we've been translating those reactions into a wiggly on-screen graphic worm, which has provided a fascinating insight. Let me just remind you of how it works. 36 floating voters, all selected by the polling experts Ipsos Mori, were split into 3 groups, each group focusing its attention on one of the party leaders.
Hi there, candidate number 2.
Oh, thank you.
There you go, sir. Candidate number 1 for you. Thank you very much.
Each person was given an electronic voting pad with keys numbered 1 to 5. They pressed 5 if they loved what they heard, 1 if they hated it. And the result, as you can see, is this on-screen worm. Red for Gordon Brown, blue for David Cameron and yellow for Nick Clegg. Well, let's have a look at the moments in the debate which got the biggest reaction from our audience, either positive or negative. To talk about that, I'm joined by Ben Page from Ipsos Mori. Ben, just before we hear the first clip, can you just remind people of how to read the worm, actually, when it comes up on the screen?
Well, what you're seeing is people's reaction to the leader they're following, because you've got 3 different leaders. You've got 3 subgroups of people who are each rating the particular leader who's talking. But if there's also a small lag as they start to talk about something, and then you'll see people react if they like it.
A bit of a time lag.
Like it. Yes, but let's have a look.
OK. Well, our first clip is going to be on Nick Clegg, who, of course, has managed to change the terms of the debate in the last week by presenting himself as a change candidate. Well, we're going to hear him now on the subject of political cooperation in the event of a hung parliament. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Time in the newspapers this week, making those ludicrous claims about total meltdown as if the world will end. The world won't end, and it'll be your choice. If you decide that no one here deserves an outright majority, then of course we'll need to, just need to be open about it and talk to each other. We'll talk to each other in order to provide the good government, the sound government that you deserve, because you deserve a government where we put your interests first and don't allow everything constantly to be hijacked by short-term political point scoring.
So something very interesting going on there, Ben Page, with Nick Clegg talking about cooperation.
Yes, he got the highest ratings of the evening when he talked about the parties working together. And I think that goes along with what we've seen this week and last week, where actually the other leaders get scored down when they start attacking each other. People want to see the main parties working together. They're not, it appears, terrified of a hung parliament.
And that's an argument that he manages to make particularly well.
Yes, and the other leaders' arguments against that didn't work as well.
Did you feel that his performance, in terms of our audience, was as strong as last week?
No, and I think the novelty factor has obviously worn off, but it was a competent performance, and if we're looking at overall scores, he was doing better overall, I would guess, than the other 2, but it was not a runaway success like it was for him last week. OK, let's move on and look at our next clip, which is with David Cameron talking about immigration and talking about his party's policy for a cap on immigration. Yep.
I do believe, though, that immigration in recent years has just simply been too high, and we do need to bring the level down. That's the first bit of fairness that needs to be sorted out. And people do want this addressed, and the other 2 parties are not actually really addressing this issue, because we believe you do need to have a cap on people coming from outside the European Union for economic reasons. That would help to bring it down.
So, David Cameron, clearly the worm going up significantly at that point for him.
Yes, people, we know that the Conservatives are one of the strongest policy areas, immigration, and that's what you saw this evening with this audience. Cameron wasn't top on everything by any sense of the imagination, but certainly on that theme in foreign affairs, absolutely.
Now, there was one interesting question which was about the Pope, and we're going to see now a clip of Gordon Brown talking about his values and his idea of society prompted by that question. Let's have a listen.
Yeah. We introduced civil partnerships, and therefore we changed the laws on homosexuality and said to people, if you're gay or straight, you have a place in British society. And I think for many people that was a great liberation, and I'm pleased that it has happened in Britain in these last few years.
Now, we saw the worm going up there for Gordon Brown. Interesting.
Yes, and I think in a sense Gordon Brown not doing his normal thing of reeling out stacks of figures, which seems to sort of turn people off, but actually talking about tolerance, and fairness, which a lot of people associate as British values, and he got a real resonance on that. Perhaps, you know, not in the sort of thing that we normally expect from Gordon Brown, and he got rewarded for that.
Fascinating stuff. Ben Page, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much to our audience as well. We'll be back with The Worm again this time next week, but for the time being, it's back to you.
Rita, thank you. Well, more reaction has been coming into tonight's debate. In a moment, the views of Plaid Cymru, but first, this from the SNP's Angus Robertson.
If people in Scotland want to avoid the exclusion of Scottish interests, which we saw on display again tonight, the only mention of Scotland came once when the Prime Minister talked about the weather, that is simply not good enough. And if people in Scotland want Scotland to be a priority in the next Parliament, it's a reason to vote SNP, because the three London parties will just forget you.
Again, struck by how little difference there was between the big UK parties on some of the main issues. None of them committing to stop the madness of spending £100 billion on nuclear weapons at a time when Barack Obama and the Russian leaders are reducing their nuclear commitments. That's a commitment that we can neither as countries afford morally or financially.
All right, let's have another word now.